Yes, my name is Dumelo Michael Molloy. Well, I grew up in the poor neighborhood in the east side of Johannesburg in the town called Katlehong, where at the time when I was living there, it was roughest town in the east side of Johannesburg. And I grew up under my grandmother's house where she raised all 9 of her kids and also raised all 22 of her grandkids. My grandmother used to have parties on Saturdays to invite the friends and her kids' friends. During those times, they would play music. That's how I got to entertain because it was a way for me to get a little bit of money for school, for my school lunch. So I would entertain them on Saturdays, and that's how I learned. But when I was 14, I joined a group called Via Katlehong, which was named after the township. That's when I learned the discipline of art. The history was, we learn it along the way, and over the years I'm still learning it even today. Every time we perform with other gumboot dancers, we sit down and have a chat and exchange information as far as what we know, because a lot of times in South Africa, when we grew up, we couldn't ask so many questions to our elders, not just with gumboot, but in a lot of things as well, as far as like our culture and who we are. My father is Swazi. I grew up under my grandmother's house with my mom, so they are Sotho-speaking people. Because of where I grew up, we kind of mix all the language together. You know, we have 11 officials that were living in Johannesburg, so we kind of like respect each other's language, so we adapt, we learn. Yes, it is true, because if we, as I said, it's 11 official languages, so all these different men speaking different languages that I came and work in the mines, they couldn't communicate to each other, and their bosses emphasizes that they shouldn't speak to each other. Maybe they were afraid that they would, get along and do something that the bosses didn't want to. I mean, it's so funny with the history of South Africa, because where they're from in the rural areas, they were all separated. The Zulu people from KwaZulu-Natal, Sotho people from Lesotho, and so forth. So when they come to Johannesburg, the oppressors did the same thing. We have in Katlehong itself, we have Sotho people living in one town, in one area, and Zulu people living in one area. So they separated black people even on the working conditions. Yes, and on top of that, they took all the tradition, so to be all confused, Exactly, the overall and the boot and the hard heads, yes. Sad, and sad and being concerned. I mean, I grew up in the late age of apartheid, while it was, right before Nelson Mandela became a president. And I've seen the sadness, I've seen the tears of my grandmother, I've seen the suffering of my mom. And to hear and exchange the knowledge of gumboot with other people, and to hear about them dying and their body being sent home without money, and the children home suffering, and the moms, losing their sons, and wives losing their husband. It's a sad story, and that it didn't end there. It's still happening today. Not too long ago, mine wife wanted more money, and then they were killed in numbers, and a lot of them, they were wounded, they were shot in the back. So this history is still going, and this is not too long, it's 2012, where you get like 34 mine workers were shot dead, and you get 78 of them that were wounded and shot in the back. This is the history that has been happening since 1976 in Sharpeville shooting, where the oppressors killed about the same number. So when you look at it, it's still set. Even today, when you look at the history and try to understand what is happening and trying to find peace. And when you think about it, like mine workers, they still living in 8 by 8 feet metal shed houses. They are digging diamonds, and diamonds are selling in a high price. Yes, but then you get mine workers living in shed. They have to wait for 3 months just to buy a pair of shoes. It really doesn't make sense. And it is happening today. And to see these conditions of how they live and what they eat, it is a very, very sad conditions. I was in Las Vegas for 11 years working there. And every time I go home, I am hoping for a change. I'm hoping for better lives. And then the same people that are waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, they still living in the shelters, but they've been working for 20, 30 years. And, my mom, I had to work here really hard to buy my mom a house because she couldn't afford to buy a house herself, but she's been working her whole life. For a long time, she lived with my grandmother, and up until a time where the government was giving out houses. The houses are small as toilets. They were giving us houses because they said, this is how we sympathize for apartheid. At least you have something, you have a house. But when you look at the house, it's not even, it's a block. Like you sleep there, you cook there, there's no bathrooms, you have to go far, there's no running water in the house, but the government was calling those houses, And I had to work hard here. Thanks, I had the opportunity to come here and work. So all my pay, I was sending it home. She's still living in the township, but a little better township. It's still the township. Yes, I did gumboot dance and also did Pantsula dance, which is another South African township dance. It was created in the street. Back in the days, they used to look at Pantsula dancers and say they are criminals, they are thug, they're no good, and this. Even our moms used to say this is not a good dance for you because of they were confused. As Pantsula as a dance, it's a movement of young people that are saying, we are not going to throw rocks, we are not going to shoot, we are not going to step people, but we are going to use movement to tell our story. We are going to use modern music to tell our story. I adopted the Pantsula as a movement, as a dance, and as a poetry to tell the story, That's a hip-hop dance, but then you get people in the township that are mixing all these information, saying, no, you're Pantsula, get out of here, you thug, why are you even knocking at my door? The movement of gumboot, the steps are the steps. The feeling of gumboot, it's the core of gumboot. You have to understand how they came about to Johannesburg and work. And then you have to understand how the dance was created. And I think that's where you get the whole sense of what it is, because every time I teach, I'm not just teaching up steps, but I'm teaching feeling, I'm teaching history. I'm telling people this is what it is. When they left the rural places, all that was promised was not there. But then they were so hooked into the little that they got and stayed longer while their kids were suffering and while their moms were suffering, while their wives were suffering. So they were hooked into a system where even though they wanted to go back, they couldn't, because then the system says, no, you've signed up to be here. So now you have to be here till you die. Oh, they were terrible. I mean, think about it. The mines are bigger now. You can drive in with a pickup truck. Back in the days, it was just the holes, Like you go down like miles and miles underground, and then you have to be hunchback, like you're not standing straight for 16 hours or more a day. In the mines, when they're working so hard and then they get out of the mines into their bunkers, In their bunkers, it's just beds. There's not even space to even stretch. It's just bed after bed after bed. You know, you share a shower with all the men, and then you sleep there, and then you don't even have a grocery because there's no space to even put anything. You know, like they even sell you food. They don't even sell you food. They sell you food within their property and say you have to go there and buy your own food. Not even in a fancy a food store. No, it's just like a small opening window where you get, oh, I just want meal, I just want beans, and that's all you have to live on. You know, at first when they started developing a use of communication, because they were not supposed to speak to each other, right? First, they cannot even speak to each other because of the diverse language that they had, but their bosses emphasizes the fact that they shouldn't speak to each other at all. So they started creating hits and steps to speak. As you know, when the foreman comes, they would make a certain sound. When the bosses come, they would make a certain sound. And those sounds kind of developed into a rhythmic dance where on their spare time when they were singing, you know, for people that they've left in the rural areas, for their sons and daughters, they started using these steps or these communication or secret words to form a dance. So they started slapping their boots even more and creating more rhythm. It got interesting to themselves as they were doing it as well, and their bosses were actually inspired and interested into them entertaining their guests. So so from that hardship that they had to create all this language, then that language became a dance, and then they were entertaining now, you know, so they could just be out there and then dancing and communicating instead of being stuck underground.